back to Drunk on Writing and the latest episode of the Tarantino Dissection. It's brought to you in part through the patronage of Ariya Norinth. Today, in this special dissection excerpt, we're taking a look at the cast of 1994's Pulp Fiction, as well as those who were almost cast. Now, Pulp Fiction was given a relatively low budget of $8.5 million, much higher than Tarantino's previous entry, Reservoir Dogs, had, but still, not a bankbuster. Kept low thanks to an agreement to pay relatively low salaries across the board, subsidized by a percentage of the profits. While, at the start, a pretty good hustle on Weinstein's part turned out to be a pretty good deal, given those profits came almost immediately thanks to the $11 million paid for the film's international rights. Remember, the cast weren't stars at this point. Sure, most had been in a variety of films, including several in Reservoir Dogs, but beyond Bruce Willis, who was convinced by his friend Harvey Keitel to be part of the film, he was a fan of Reservoir Dogs. And can we just talk about how crucial Harvey Keitel was to Tarantino's start? Between this and financing Dogs, he was like Tarantino's godfather. Jeez. And he played the pivotal role of the Wolf for Pulp Fiction, a part not that different from one he previously played in 1993's Point of No Return, and one he'd reprised in a series of commercials for Direct Line starting in 2014. But yeah, even if Willis was really only known for Die Hard, unless you count Look Who's Talking, and his recent films, Hudson Hawk, The Last Boy Scout, had been both critical and box office disappointments, he was still something of a draw. How do you think they sold those international rights, huh? But besides him, nothing. Even John Travolta, once a pretty big name, he was almost at the point of obscurity as well, buoyed in part by the Look Who's Talking franchise. But none of that mattered, because Tarantino was the draw. Everyone else was almost the cherry on top. Though he did write his characters with specific actors in mind. The Wolf, written for Harvey Keitel. Butch? No, not written for Bruce Willis. Actually, written for, get this, Matt Dillon, who apparently hesitated to sign on. But because John Travolta was given the role of Vincent, more on that in a moment, the role Willis originally wanted, and Willis eyed Butch instead, well, history was made, and Willis made his sort of comeback, beating out other possibilities for the role like Mickey Rourke and Sylvester Stallone. Now, John Travolta, who plays the pivotal Vincent Vega, he's the only character in every segment of the film. He gets first billing in the credits. Bruce Willis gets a coveted and credit. But Vincent was written for Michael Madsen, who of course played Vic Vega in Reservoir Dogs, but couldn't commit to Pulp Fiction because he'd already signed on to 1994's Wyatt Earp. Given Travolta earned himself an Academy Award nomination for his performance, which he's said to have chosen over the chance to play Seth Gecko in From Dusk Till Dawn, smart decision. I'm sure Madsen has kicked himself time and again for that decision. But would it have been the same? I really rather doubt it, since John Travolta was the one who came up with Vincent's now iconic look, and, of course, given his history with the likes of Saturday Night Fever, brought a reality-based depth to the character, something that would have been lacking with Madsen, or, frankly, any of the other possibilities, including Daniel Day-Lewis, James Gandolfini, Sean Penn, and William Hurt. Plus, without Travolta taking on the role, we wouldn't have been teased for the last 15 years about the possibility of a Vega Brothers spin-off. Outside of which, I should note, Travolta and Tarantino have never teamed up again. At least not yet. Samuel L. Jackson, who of course played Jules, and years and a franchise later would have his character's tombstone engraved with the path of the righteous man in Captain America: The Winter Soldier, he was also not the first pick for this role, which was written not for any rappers, as Tarantino's notes tell us, but for Lawrence, nay Larry Fishburne, who turned it down because he felt it made heroin use attractive. Fishburne would also later add, however, fucking Sam walks away with the movie. Sam fucking sticks the movie in his pocket and walks away from it. Walks into a fucking leading man career. I'm sure he wasn't too upset. I mean, he's Morpheus. Though I'm also certain an Afro Lawrence Fishburne would have absolutely delivered here. Yes, Jules was originally meant to have a giant afro. I rather like the Jerry curls. Other possibilities for the role included Eddie Murphy and Charles Dutton, though it was almost given to Paul Calderone, who'd end up with a small name-dropping role after Jackson secured the spot and became a Tarantino mainstay with a second audition. Interestingly, Pulp Fiction is the only instance to date where Jackson and Tarantino appeared together on screen. One thing that actually kind of fascinates me is that Jackson was also considered for the role of Marcellus Wallace alongside Ving Rhames, who smartly turned down a role in 1994's Renaissance Man to help bring the character to life, with an added touch of mystery too, by way of an oddly placed bandage. His soul wasn't sucked out as some contend, he merely cut himself shaving. Now, you'd think, given she's on the cover and she'd headline 2 of his later films, that Tarantino had Uma Thurman in mind for Mia Wallace right from the start. But that's not the case at all. In fact, he didn't write this role with seemingly anyone in mind, and his potential casting list included quite a variety of actors, including the likes of Virginia Madsen, yes, Michael Madsen's sister, Alfred Woodard, Jennifer Beals, and Bridget Fonda. And the list of people who auditioned or were considered for the role is just as varied, including Rosanna Arquette, who ended up playing Jodie, beating out the likes of Pam Grier, who will talk further another day, Isabella Rossellini, Meg Ryan, Daryl Hannah, Joan Cusack, Michelle Pfeiffer, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, who apparently turned it down due to her commitment to Seinfeld, Holly Hunter, Halle Berry, Annabella Sciorra, and even Jennifer Aniston. But while all this searching was happening, Uma Thurman's agent insisted she'd be right for the part, and so her and Tarantino, who didn't think she was quite right at this point, met for dinner, where they didn't so much talk about the movie as each other. In an interview with Rolling Stone, Tarantino actually compared the meeting to the scene in Pulp Fiction where Vincent takes Mia to Jackrabbit Slim's. If you remember that scene, Tarantino said, the two people don't really know each other. It's a strange situation, kind of unusual, why they're there together. But in the course of having to suffer through this thing, a connection happens. They click into each other and begin to appreciate each other. And Uma and I were doing that scene. We were living the movie, all right? I left thinking, who is that girl? God, she could be Mia. I was still meeting with a bunch of people, however, he continued, and I didn't know Uma was Mia until the next time I went out on a meeting. It was with this terrific actress who totally got the piece. But I'm sitting there giving her my private thoughts about Mia, stuff that Uma and I had talked about that's not on the page, when all of a sudden, I felt like I was cheating on Uma. It felt like I was having an illicit affair. How can I talk to another girl about Mia when Uma is Mia? And that's when I knew. Except Uma Thurman turned the role down. At first. Reportedly, after, on her agent's advice, Tarantino called her, read the script to her over the phone, and convinced her to take on the role. And apparently to become his muse, which he's since referred to her as. We'll touch on that and their, we'll call it a relationship for now, another time. Though I already mentioned him briefly, I should note one other Reservoir Dogs player makes for a pretty prominent role in Pulp Fiction, and that's Tim Roth, who plays Pumpkin, a character that was written for him. Not only that, his honey bunny, who shares all his scenes, was specifically written with Amanda Plummer in mind. And I could see why after her performance. Just 3 other supporting roles were also written for specific actors. Fabienne Foroarén-Jacob, who turned it down for 1994's Three Colors Red. Fabienne would, of course, go on to be played by Maria de Medeiros, who's just so damn cute and vulnerable here. I kind of love her. Captain Coons, he of the Pocket Watch, was also written for Christopher Walken, who, evoking his performance in The Deer Hunter, delivered one of the most memorable monologues of his, or probably anyone's career, even if he forgot his lines halfway through. Honestly, it made it even better. And finally, Lance was written for John Cusack, who simply passed on the role, which ended up going to Tarantino's second choice, Eric Stoltz, though apparently some TriStar execs wanted Gary Oldman for the part. In his initial listing of who could play who, Tarantino also had Oldman down as a possibility for Lance. And Pumpkin. And Vincent. After all, along with Walken, he'd wowed in True Romance. I wonder why Dennis Hopper didn't get any love. I mean, he was great in True Romance. You couldn't find a spot for Dennis Hopper. He should have been in this. He should have become a Tarantino mainstay. But apparently, early on, Tarantino even considered casting Gary Oldman as Jules, with Tim Roth opposite as Vincent, and the two playing a couple of English guys. Maybe even their same characters from Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. That wouldn't be too far-fetched given Butch's cab driver, Esmeralda Villalobos, is directly taken from the 1991 short film Curdled, albeit with a name change. To sort of wrap this all up, after Pulp Fiction won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival, Tarantino thanked his cast, who he said turned a pretty good script into an obsolete document. And I think he's right. I don't think we'd be celebrating this nearly 3 decades later if he wasn't. This has been a Drunk on Writing dissection excerpt on Pulp Fiction's cast and those who might have been cast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to check out the other excerpts or the full Pulp Fiction dissection. And if you'd like more like these, please subscribe to the channel or head on over to drunkonwriting.com where you can get more episodes more often. Until next time, cheers and keep on writing.